Okay, so we are on 2.4, data types and R vectors. So variable types in R, there are numerous variable types available, but atomic vectors will be the simplest ones you will come across with in R. So this is a table outlining different variable types that you'll be working with. You're going to continuously see these, so I 100% suggest that you go ahead and understand what each of these are, because it can very well get confusing in the beginning when it comes to this type of notation. So the first one is of type doubles. So what is this? It stores regular numbers. So we'll see whole numbers as you see on the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, following through with integers, which is self-explanatory in its own name, but the notation is a little different. You have to add a capital L after the number in order to tell R that it is meant to be an integer and not a double. Next is characters. This is going to be text data, whether it be a letter, whether it be a word, a sentence, or so on. Whatever is placed within quotation marks, this will be considered a character. So you can input a number 1 in quotations mark and it will be considered a character, not a double nor an integer, simply because that's the way it's written. And then you have logicals. These are Boolean data points. So what you're going to get is a true or false value. And then complex data types are going to be complex numbers. As you may recall from introductory algebra or even statistics, you're going to have a value of I associated with a number. Next and lastly here is the raw data type. You're going to get raw bytes. So this is going to be binary code. It's going to be a 0 or a 1, whichever one it comes down to. You may not see these very often, at least not in an introductory course, but they are used quite frequently within programming. So just diving a little deeper here into doubles. So they store regular numbers such as positive or negative values, numbers with decimal values, or negative values. R stores numerical data as a double by default. So it will assume the number is a double just to play it safe, because it can be both an integer and a double. That's what R defaults to. It tends to make your life a little easier when it comes to not declaring the variable type. And being able to check the type of it is a pretty important task to do, especially when you're getting started. You can go ahead and use the function type of, and then you put the variable name within there, and the response you're going to get from the console is type double that we see here. Moving on to integers. So this is going to store numerical data that does not contain a value after a decimal point. This is very important to know if you are coming from a different programming language. This is somewhat of a different notation that you're used to. That L is what tells R that this is going to be an integer and not a double. So you do have to explicitly tell it to store it as an integer. In this class, you're probably not going to end up using integers very often, at least not explicitly to state in programs, but they do come up. Following on is the type character. So here, like I said before, it stores your information as text data. It can either be a letter, a word, or a sentence. And an individual element of a character is called a string. So you may hear me refer to characters as string values. That's just very easy to remember it instead of just thinking of characters. So strings are distinguishable by the quotation marks. Like I said before, you can put whatever you want within the quotation marks. It's not going to matter if it's a double, an integer, a complex. It's only going to be stored as a string. And then logicals here. So these are vectors that are stored as either true or false. This is great for a quick comparison of variables. You're going to use the greater than or less than or double equal to signs next to each other to make comparisons. So you're able to compare data types, columns, rows of data to each other. If we see here on the right, I went ahead and made 2 different examples that show what the comparisons can look like. So you can do integers, you can do strings, you can compare many different data points or data types. In R, these values must be written in capitalized fashion for R to distinguish the Boolean value. I know there's languages like Python where you don't have to capitalize the whole word, just the first letter. In R, you're gonna have to get used to typing it all in capital letters. Within the complex and the raw, the complex data types store mathematical complex numbers. Not often used, at least not in this class. You'll definitely see this in the more advanced mathematical classes or in programming. These do contain the complex notation of having an I to go along with it. And then lastly, raw data types, you're going to store these as bytes. Zeros and ones, very simple. I don't think we'll be touching upon this too much in this course.